Welcome to your deep dive. So it seems we've got a real digital detective on our hands. You've sent us this document, let's call it a manifesto from someone named Jackson.
And quite the manifesto it is, full of predictions about OpenAI and their quest for AGI.
And Jackson seems pretty convinced that they're keeping secrets, specifically this Q project. But before we get into all that, let's take a step back. When we talk about AGI, what are we really talking about? How is it different from, say, the AI that's recommending your next podcast?
Right, it's an important distinction. We're not just talking about AI that can write a decent email or even compose a catchy jingle. AGI, at least in theory, is on a whole other level. It's about creating an artificial intelligence that possesses the flexibility and adaptability of the human mind, something that could potentially tackle any intellectual task that a person can.
Okay, so we're not just talking about a souped-up calculator here. We're talking about something, well, more human. And this is where Jackson's obsession with parameters comes in, right? This idea that more parameters equals more intelligence.
Yes, and it's a tempting idea, isn't it? This notion that if we just build bigger and bigger AI models, cram in trillions of connections, like synapses in a brain.
We'll eventually get there.
It's not quite that simple, unfortunately. It's like thinking that if you just stack enough bricks together, you'll eventually end up with a skyscraper.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it than that. Architecture, engineering.
And in the case of AI, maybe something fundamentally different.
Exactly. There might be something else, something we haven't quite figured out yet, that's needed for true AGI.
Okay, so it's more nuanced than just raw processing power. But then Jackson throws in this curveball, the Chinchilla effect. He presents it as almost OpenAI's secret weapon, a way to accelerate their progress without needing those massive AI behemoths. Fill us in, what is the Chinchilla effect?
Well, the Chinchilla effect comes from a research paper by DeepMind, Google's AI team. And it's pretty groundbreaking because it suggests that instead of just focusing on making AI models bigger.
Which is what everyone seems to be doing.
Exactly. Instead of just going bigger, Chinchilla suggests we should be focusing on the quality and quantity of the data we use to train these models.
So it's not just about the size of the brain, it's about what you feed it.
Exactly. Like, imagine trying to teach a kid about the world, but only showing them blurry photos and playing them distorted audio. You wouldn't expect them to learn very effectively, would you?
Yeah, definitely not.
It's the same with AI. If you want it to develop a deep understanding of the world, you need to give it rich, high-quality data.
And this is where Jackson seems to think OpenAI is pulling ahead.
That's his claim. He believes they're leveraging this Chinchilla effect, using smarter training methods and potentially achieving much more with smaller models than anyone thought possible.
Which would be significant, because training those massive models takes an incredible amount of computing power, not to mention the energy required.
Exactly. If OpenAI has found a more efficient way to reach AGI, well, it could change the entire game.
And potentially leave their competitors in the dust. But that brings us to another layer of this whole mystery, this Q project that Jackson keeps alluding to. Why all the secrecy if they're simply following a well-established research path? It is public knowledge now that OpenAI had originally planned something called GPT-5, and then it just vanished.
Vanished is a good word for it. There were rumors of internal disagreements about the direction of the project, concerns about its sheer scale.
Jackson claims GPT-4 was going to be massive, even used the word colossal at one point.
And then there was that whole debacle with Elon Musk, OpenAI's former co-founder. He had very publicly voiced his concerns about the speed of AI development, even went so far as to call for a pause. Shortly after that, the rumors about GPT-5 being shelved started to surface. Coincidence?
Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say for sure. But one thing that jumped out at me was Jackson's mention of Igor Betkov, the
AI soothsayer.
That's the
Yeah.
one. He's got a bit of a mixed track record, right? Some hits, some misses, but always interesting. And he seems convinced that OpenAI is intentionally downplaying their progress. In fact, he claims
That they're already much further along than they're letting on, that this Q project is their real ace in the hole.
And this is where things get really interesting because Jackson suggests that this shift towards secrecy, this pivot, if you will, happened right around the time
That the U.S. government started putting restrictions on the export of high-end AI chips to certain countries.
China, specifically. The very chips needed to train those massive AI models that Jackson claims OpenAI is supposedly moving away from.
So we've gone from a discussion about parameters and training data to geopolitics and international intrigue. I think we might need a bigger whiteboard.
And the plot thickens because then Jackson throws in another twist. This whole thing about GPT-5 being canceled or renamed, maybe even absorbed into this mysterious Q project.
Yes, this is where the document veers into truly speculative territory. Jackson drops hints about a GPT-8, which he claims is actually the true successor to GPT-4, and that OpenAI is intentionally obscuring its development timeline.
He even mentions Scott Aronson by name, which I have to admit piqued my interest. Aronson's a giant in the field of quantum computing, and he took that sabbatical from UT Austin to work on AI safety at OpenAI. He's been surprisingly open about his concerns about AGI, even going so far as to call for regulations.
And let's not forget that rather unsettling blog post where Aronson alluded to working on something at OpenAI that terrifies him. He never explicitly said what it was, but the timing lines up with when Jackson claims this Q project was really heating up.
So we've got secret projects, whispers of internal strife, and a healthy dose of AI anxiety from a respected figure like Aronson. It's starting to feel like we're piecing together a puzzle where some of the pieces are still missing.
And that's precisely why we need to be cautious about jumping to conclusions. Jackson is clearly painting a dramatic picture. But whether it's entirely accurate or perhaps selectively emphasizing certain details to fit his narrative is something we need to consider.
Fair enough. But even if we set aside Jackson's more speculative claims, there's still this underlying question about OpenAI's approach to AGI. He seems convinced they're going all in on multimodal AI, training their models on not just text, but images, video, even robotics. Is he onto something there?
Absolutely. Multimodal learning is widely seen as the next frontier in AI. It makes perfect sense if you think about how humans learn. We experience the world through multiple senses. We process language alongside visual information, sounds, even physical sensations. To create an AI that truly mimics human-level intelligence, it needs to be able to do the same.
So instead of just feeding the AI every book ever written, we're now showing it every movie, every YouTube video. That's a staggering amount of data.
It is, and that's precisely why the scale of these projects is so mind-boggling. We're talking about training AI models on datasets that encompass virtually the entire digital world. And that raises some thorny questions about where all this data is coming from and what it means for things like privacy and copyright.
Jackson seems convinced that OpenAI is training its AI on all the data on the internet. He even claims they've struck deals with companies like Google and Facebook to access their massive data troves. Is that even possible? And is it ethical?
Those are the billion-dollar questions. There's no doubt that OpenAI and other companies working on large-scale AI models are using publicly available data, things like web pages, social media posts, open-source datasets. But to go beyond that, to access the truly massive datasets held by tech giants, well, that would require navigating a complex web of legal agreements, data privacy concerns, and potentially even public backlash.
And this is where Jackson's anxieties about what OpenAI is creating start to resonate. He clearly believes they're on the verge of something truly revolutionary, even dangerous. And it's hard to ignore those concerns entirely when you consider the sheer scale and secrecy of these projects.
It's a balancing act. On the one hand, we want to push the boundaries of AI research to see what's possible. But we also need to proceed with caution to ensure these powerful technologies are developed responsibly and ethically.
So how do we find that balance? Because the potential benefits of AGI are enormous, but so are the risks.
It's a question that's been debated by ethicists, researchers, policymakers for years. And there's no easy answer. But I think it starts with transparency and accountability. We need to move away from this culture of secrecy in AI development and encourage open dialogue about the potential impacts, both positive and negative.
Jackson seems to think that OpenAI is operating in a bit of a black box. He even suggests that some of their decisions might be driven by factors beyond just scientific curiosity. He hints at pressure from investors, perhaps even governments, to deliver breakthroughs that could have geopolitical implications.
And it's not entirely implausible. We've already seen how AI research can become entangled with national security concerns and the competition for technological dominance. The question is, how do we ensure that these powerful technologies are developed in a way that benefits all of humanity, not just a select few?
So we've got this complex interplay of factors, the rapid pace of AI research, the potential for both incredible good and potential harm, the pressure from investors, governments, and even the public to see progress. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but that's why this deep dive is so crucial. We need to approach these complex issues with a critical eye, understanding the technical details as well as the broader societal implications.
You know, it's like we've fallen down a rabbit hole with this Jackson document, secret projects, whispers of government conspiracies. It's a lot.
He certainly paints a compelling, if somewhat paranoid, picture.
He does. But even if we take all of Jackson's theories with, shall we say, a grain of salt, there's an underlying anxiety there that I think a lot of people share.
Oh, absolutely. This unease about the pace of technological change, the feeling of, wait, are we in control of this thing or is it the other way around?
Hmm.
It's not unique to Jackson.
Exactly. And it's not even really just about AI, is it? It's about this feeling that the world is becoming increasingly complex, driven by forces that seem beyond our grasp.
It's that old saying, right? Technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for amazing things or not so amazing things.
So where does that leave us if we can't just hit the pause button on technological progress,
Mm.
which, let's face it, we can't? How do we navigate this anxiety, this fear of the unknown?
Well, I think the first step is simply acknowledging that anxiety is a valid response.
Yeah.
We're talking about potentially world-altering technology here. It would be strange not to feel a little uneasy.
Right. It's like pretending we're not worried about where AI might lead us doesn't make those worries magically disappear.
Exactly. So we acknowledge the anxieties and then we start asking questions. We educate ourselves. We engage in open and honest discussions about the potential benefits and risks of AI. And most importantly, we don't just leave those conversations to the experts. Everyone needs a seat at this table.
So, a call to action for our listeners today. Don't just be a passive observer in this AI revolution. Engage, ask those tough questions, challenge assumptions, and demand transparency from those who are shaping the future of this technology.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Because at the end of the day, AI's trajectory isn't preordained. It's a path we're forging right now, collectively.
And on that note, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep asking those questions, keep the conversation going, and who knows, maybe we can create a future where both humanity and AI can thrive. Thanks for joining us.